the Senate. We have a new member of the Senate. I think his name is Evan Thomas. He's a student senator. I'd like to welcome him to the Senate and make sure that he feels very comfortable to ask any question you would like at any time, within reason. Okay. With that, we're going to move on to the agenda of the meeting. Here it is, and for Marie and everybody else who's sitting in the back, I've expanded it, but if you can't see it, I'll expand it some more. So what we're going to do is we're going to approve the minutes. And by the way, we are streaming live and we're recording, and this microphone does not amplify into this room. This microphone is used solely for the purpose of the videotaping and the live streaming. And so if you have any questions, if anybody wants to speak from the floor, please give me a moment to bring you the microphone. We're going to first start out with the usual approval of the minutes. Here is the minutes done by our erstwhile trustee and amazingly on task Senate Executive Coordinator, Chris Prosser. There are 12 pages of them. I'm sure you've scanned them. Are there any changes to this? Yes.
Zachary Stark-McMillan, student senator, MacMillan, 2 L's.
We may be academics, but we sometimes can't spell. And so if there's anybody else with spelling changes, we will certainly accept them before or after the fact. Are there any other changes that need to be done? If not, then I'd like to ask for approval of the minutes, and this is just by acclamation, or we can just say, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say nay. All abstained, please say abstained. We have approved the minutes. That brings us to the standard next part of the meeting, which is the State of the University, which is the remarks by President Lariviere and or Provost Bean. Unfortunately, President Lariviere and Provost Bean are not available today, so we will not have those remarks. And just by way of letting you know, we were supposed to have a discussion and then a vote on the new partnership today, but because President Lariviere and Provost Bean were not here, we decided it would be best if we put this off until they were here, which will occur at the next meeting in April, on April 13th. So we do not have a State of the University announcement, so we will move in quickly to new business. And we have, if you remember, the format of this Senate meetings for the rest of the year has been changed by a motion by you all. Hi, Ollie. And we put all the motions up front so we can get to them right away. So the first motion we're going to be talking about today is the motion to adopt the policy on academic freedom and freedom of speech. And Professor Carl Bybee, who's chair of a Senate ad hoc committee on academic freedom, will come down here now and present this motion and some of the background and meaning behind this motion. And let me call up this motion, which is right here. There is a number of pages of this motion. It goes through the preamble, academic freedom, et cetera, and we can go through it as Carl would like. But right now, this is what we'll be discussing. Carl?
Thank you, Nathan. My name is Carl Bybee, yes, and I keep forgetting the name of our committee. Thanks. Our ad hoc committee on actually academic freedom, language, and policy review. I do have, I know that we have the motion posted here, and then at the bottom of the motion, when you read through it and carefully examined it, you found at the bottom the link to the official committee report that goes along with the motion. I do have copies. If anyone wants a print copy to look at, to follow along with, they're welcome to them. And I also have copies of the larger report itself. Let's see. I think I just handed out my notes to myself. No, here they are. I mean, if somebody wants them, then you can read them, and then I don't have to do this. So I'd like to say that our committee is composed of myself, Heather Briston, the Corrigan Solari University historian and archivist, Professor Frank Stahl, molecular biology, Professor Gene Stockard, Department of Planning, Public Policy and Management, Theodora Thompson, admissions specialist, Office of Admissions, and Deborah S. Thurman, Law School Human Resources Coordinator, University of Oregon School of Law. So in forming the committee, there was a substantial interest in making sure that the committee was as representative of the campus community as the University Senate itself. And I think that I see most of our committee members here, and I'm happy to see that. And I want to thank them for their energetic, thoughtful, and timely work in preparing our report and in drafting today's what I think is a very important motion for us as an institution. I'd also like to thank our other campus colleagues who've assisted us in our work, and our colleagues actually across the country, including Professor Joan Del Fattore, an expert in academic freedom from the University of Delaware, Professor Bruce Fryer from the University of Michigan Law School, who led the successful efforts there in recently passing a strengthened policy of academic freedom, and Rachel Levinson, Senior Counsel for the American Association of University Professors. Our committee was formed in a response to a number of recent court decisions, creating a degree of ambiguity about the status of academic freedom on public university campuses. Given the University of Oregon's long-standing support for academic freedom, it was clear that it was time for us to review and update our own policies. And our efforts were guided by two concerns. The first is the recognition that academic freedom can't stand alone. It's not a single concept that has a meaningful life in and of its own. As Carrie Nelson, current president of the American Association of University Professors, has observed, academic freedom is only one leg of a three-legged stool. Academic freedom, shared governance, and tenure together support the higher education system we've had in place for over half a century. That all three of these components have to be in place for there to really be a meaningful sense of academic freedom. The second guiding concern is that academic freedom policy must be tailored to the unique history and structure of each institution of higher education, and consequently, it's not possible to simply pick up some kind of template and apply it to each university. We have to kind of tailor it to our own individual history and concerns. I think the implications of these two concerns were made clear in the preamble to our motion, which you've already read it, but I'll read it again because I want to remind myself of what the preamble was. The University of Oregon views academic freedom and freedom of speech as the cornerstones to its functioning as a public university in the service of a democratic society, and as necessary conditions for the exercise of shared governance. The University of Oregon Constitution created and delegated daily governance authority to the University Senate. That would be us. The Constitution stipulates that the constituent groups represented by the University Senate include the statutory faculty, librarians, officers of administration, career non-tenure track research faculty, students, and classified staff. This policy statement defines the conditions of academic freedom and free speech necessary for the University of Oregon and the University Senate to fulfill its roles in the creation and implementation of policy and carrying out the public mission of the university. Crucial goals of this policy are ensuring that all groups all groups represented in the University Senate, have adequate protection so that they can meaningfully participate in shared governance and clarifying a robust view of academic freedom and freedom of speech and teaching, research, shared governance, public participation, and debate. And this is one of the reasons why when you read through the motion, first that we've titled it Academic Freedom and Freedom of Speech, recognizing that because of the unique situation for us at the University of Oregon in the constitution of our Senate, we have to stipulate both policy with regard to academic freedom, which is more particularly oriented towards faculty, and then policy regarding freedom of speech, which takes into account the other representatives that form and serve as senators in our university Senate. So you have the motion before you. Hopefully, you've looked over the report that presents the motion, and so our committee, our committee is ready to take questions or provide clarifications. And thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Now we've opened up this motion to the floor, and therefore we now can take comments, questions, comments. The result of all of this is that we're going to take a vote. So if you have anything that you need clarifying, any comments you'd like to raise about this particular motion, please, let's hear them. John, are you going to say something? So hold on, you got to talk into here. Tell us who you are.
Thank you, John Bonine, Law School. Carl, I wonder, and you got so many members of the committee, I don't know if you can take a friendly amendment, but and I don't want to slow anything down. But the U.S. Constitution talks about freedom of speech, whereas the Oregon Constitution talks about freedom of expression. Decisions of the Supreme Court of Oregon have interpreted the freedom of expression as slightly more robust and broad than freedom of speech. I wonder if there would be any problem in saying speech and expression, and I wonder if that will upset any apple carts. It may not be necessary. It might be, for example, sufficient if we were to note in the minutes that when we talk about freedom of speech, we mean the freedom of expression guaranteed under the Oregon Constitution. My point is simply to make sure that we, when given a choice, the administration should follow the more liberal, broad precedents of Oregon constitutional interpretation than the possibility that there might be some more restrictive federal interpretations of the federal Constitution. I wonder if we could either add the phrase or otherwise make it very clear in the minutes. I'm not sure what's best. I like phrases, but that might be a problem. I don't know.
My initial inclination would be to add the clarification that with regard to the motion that when we refer to freedom of speech, we're referring to freedom of expression according to the Oregon interpretation. I think if we tried to work that freedom of expression notion through this particular motion, I'm not so worried about it holding things up, but I think there's a level of confusion that it would introduce into most people's kind of first impression, first reading of the motion. That would be my sense, but I'm certainly open to.
Are you comfortable with that, John?
I'm comfortable with that as long as it is clear that that's been stated as the intent of the movers of the motion. And then if anybody in the Senate has a problem with that broader interpretation, I would ask them now to say so on the record. Otherwise, it could be understood to be the sense of the legislative history of this motion that we're referring to the robust freedom of expression under the Oregon Constitution.
I agree. And so if there's anybody who would like to comment on that issue, this is the time to do so. Hearing no comments, we will accept Professor Bonine's comments, and we will place them in the record for the purpose of clarifying this motion. Is there anybody else who would like to raise any issues, ask any questions regarding this motion?
Could you do some more scrolling? Because I can't get anything more than one page of the motion on my laptop.
Okay. There's this part here on academic freedom, which has been up for a while. There's more of it, and then there's freedom of speech as well. And then there is some related documents. Problem, and nobody except the people in the front row under the age of 30 will be able to read it. So, here, seeing no other comments, I want to thank Carl and the committee, and we will move on to a vote. Okay? So, we're now going to vote on this motion. You have three choices, yea, nay, or abstain. All in favor, please say yea. All opposed, please say nay. All who would like to abstain, please say abstain. The motion carries unanimously, and I want to thank Carl and the rest of the committee for their very hard work on this. And the committee includes, and I really do want to mention them again by name, Heather Briston, Frank Stahl, Gene Stockard, Theo Thompson, and Deborah Thurman. I thank you all for your very hard work. And why don't we give them a round of applause, please? Thank you. We now move on to the next piece of new business, which brings joy to all of us, our hearts. It's the winter curriculum report. And I would like to call up the esteemed Professor Paul Engelking, who has been in charge of this committee since the early 1800s and knows everything about this and is now going to present the curriculum report.
Thank you, Nathan. You've all had the opportunity to read the curriculum report, and so I'll take comments from the corrections from the floor, and also I think I have two that I need to read into the record. Are there any things from the floor? Okay. Yeah, okay, good.
So what we're doing here, by the way, is the preliminary curriculum report has been posted. Sometimes last-minute changes occur, and so we place these last-minute changes into the record, and then the final report notes those changes. And we do this 3 times a year, and this is why we're doing it now. So are there changes?
Okay. One is from economics, and it's via the Michael Price, who's actually a senator but was unable to attend. So I'm introducing this for him, and that is Econ 427-527, which is the Games and Decisions course, has Math 111 or equivalent, Econ 311, and Econ 320 as the prerequisites. And Michael points out that that's redundant in that you can't take 311 or 320 without having Math 111. And it requests that we remove Math 111 or equivalent from the prerequisites. So I'd like your permission to do that. The other is under other curricular matters. Yes, that's towards the end of the report. We received a letter from the board giving us approval, and I'll read it to you. Dear President Lariviere, at the October 28, 2010 meeting of the Academic Strategies Committee of the State Board of Higher Education, the Provost Council submitted a recommendation for approval of the request by the University of Oregon to offer an instructional program leading to a PhD in architecture. Following the committee's review of the program, Director Rosemary Powers made a motion to approve the proposal, with Director Preston Pullums providing the second. Those voting in favor, Chair James Fransconi and Directors Hannah Fisher, Rosemary Powers, and Preston Pollins. Those voting in opposition, none. So I would like to enter in a short paragraph to be drafted that contains essentially this information without the needed vote count. So,
Any other changes?
I don't think so. Lexi.
Hold on a minute.
I'm Lexi Wellman. I'm curriculum coordinator for the College of Arts and Sciences. And I sent a list of corrections, and there are a couple of important ones on page 20 there. Latin American Studies, actually, they want it to be effective spring 2011, not winter 2011. The first paragraph there. First
Okay.
paragraph. So that
Okay,
should
so
read
let's make a correction
effective term spring 2011, not winter. Under theater arts, the second paragraph, at the very end of that paragraph, it says effective fall 2010. That should be fall 2011. And under ethnic studies, that one is okay. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Are there other corrections from the floor? Yes.
Okay, so we accept your report, and now we will vote to adopt it.
Thank you.
Okay? So, what we're doing is we're voting to adopt the curriculum report, which we have to do. That's one of our primary responsibilities, as exciting as it is. And we will be voting on accepting the report with changes. So, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say nay. All abstained, please say abstain. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Nathan.
To the curriculum committee,
And thank
to
you, Senator.
everybody in the curriculum committee who meets many, many hours a month on this. And also, I wish to thank the registrar and the registrar's office for providing such excellent support. Thank you. We will see you in the spring, Paul.
Thank you. I have a lab right now.
We will see you in the spring. All right, we will now move on to the open discussion section of this meeting. If you remember, we have a period in which we do not have any active business going on. We just discuss a topic. The Undergraduate Council has proposed 3 fairly significant changes in the university grading, and they fall under the rubric of grade culture. And instead of bringing, hold on a minute. Can you guys, hey, shh, thank you. I can't hear. Thank you. Thank you. So, what we're going to do is we're going to have a 30 minutes, 35, 40 minutes to discuss this grade culture set of changes, and there's 3 of them, so that we can start to understand the details and the history and the background behind all of this, which ends up being fairly complex and worthy of discussion before we bring it to a vote and have another discussion, the formal discussion, next time in April. Okay, so this is sort of the introduction and the background to this set of issues. And I'd like to introduce Ian McNeely, who is the chair of the Undergraduate Council, to make this presentation. Do you have anything, PowerPoint? Okay. Ian, I will find it. Yeah. Okay. Let me find it in a minute. Karen, you'll pass that out? Thank you.
So I'm going to stall for about 10 minutes because I'd invited both an undergraduate member and a fellow faculty member of the council to come and present motions 11A, B, and C. And since the meeting is running very efficiently, they're not here yet. I told them to show up at 3:30, 3:45. If they're not here, then I'll go ahead and do it myself. I don't want to just fill space, though. I want to give you a sense of how long we've been working on this. When I say we, I mean before I became involved in the Undergraduate Council 2 years ago. Back in 2005, 2006, Mark Thoma, who's a professor of economics, and some other members of the council undertook to study the problem of grade inflation which is a problem nationwide. It's not unique to the U of O. It's actually no worse and no better here than at other public universities. And that study found that the percentage of A's, let me get the stats right, the percentage of A's awarded in a representative selection of regularly offered UO courses between 1992 and 2004 went up from 31% to 42%. During that same time, the percentage of A's and B's together went up from 66% to 73%. And yet, during that same time, the average SAT scores, both math and verbal, of entering UO freshmen did not go up significantly. So if you use that as a control, then that suggests that grades are going up in absence of evidence of higher scholastic aptitude on the part of entering students. During the subsequent years, especially when I became involved in the council, we widened our focus from grade inflation, which when you think about it is not a problem in itself, any more so than conventional inflation in commodity prices, but for the fact that there's an upper limit higher than which grades cannot go. That's the A+. So one of the issues we've become increasingly concerned with is grade compression, the bunching up of grades at the top of the spectrum, particularly in the A+. One of the other hats I wear at the university is president of Phi Beta Kappa. And in that capacity, I look at hundreds of transcripts every year, and I can tell you there are vast discrepancies in the use, or some might say abuse, of the A+. And so that's one of the issues that's been on our radar screen for several years. There's a more general issue of discrepancies among departments. Some departments have very high average grades. Some departments have very low average grades. Some departments have mandated policies in effect, the econ department and the business school, that require, or at least highly incentivize, professors to give particular distributions to their grades. There's one subject code in the university in which the average grade is higher than a 4.0, which was very surprising to me to learn. There's a general sense that grades have begun to lose their meaning. This is anecdotal evidence, but last month, Inside Oregon, the newsletter, ran an unscientific survey asking people who read the newsletter to answer the question, do grades represent achievement? Do they represent accomplishment? Effort? Do they represent achievement? Do they represent effort? Or do they have no meaning at all? And last I checked, the highest number of responses went to no meaning at all, with the other two more or less evenly split. So when I became involved in the council a couple of years ago, we faced the problem what to do about this. Again, it's not just a local problem, it's a national problem. My first instinct as a faculty member is I don't want anybody telling me how to assign my grades. And I think that's a fairly widely shared instinct. At the same time that I realize that if we don't, as a faculty, begin to at least start conversations on this issue, other people will begin to insert themselves into that discussion. This is an issue that, and yet another hat I wear, chair of the Academic Council, I tried to flag that as the state of Oregon, as the potential UO Board of Directors, as federal and state agencies begin to ask the question, how well are you doing here? There's a move to substitute other things besides grades in the place of grades. Assessment rubrics, scores on the Collegiate Learning Assessment Examination, the National Survey of Student Engagement, any number of other quantifiable performance benchmarks. And I want to be able to say to those people, should they ask, how well are you doing? We should be able to say, we are doing very well because our grades are high, and we are improving because our grades are going up. I fear that we cannot credibly make that claim because we have not articulated as a campus what grades mean. So the Undergraduate Council consulted with an extremely wide range of campus constituencies and committees. And I want to thank Professor Tublitz for suggesting some of these. I won't go into all the details. I would estimate that I've made this presentation to about a dozen different committees. My colleagues on the council have taken it to their departments, in some cases to students. I've been to the ASUO Senate. I've been to this body last year, made more or less the same presentation, which you may recall if you were involved in that. And probably our biggest effort was I sent out an email to 23,000 people, the entire student body, faculty, and GTF staff, asking them to contribute to this blog that we set up. And on that blog, we have the 3 proposals that we started off with listed, and that attracted copious feedback from everyone who cared to do so. Got about 1,500 unique visitors and about 80 pieces of feedback that I processed into a report, which I invite you to read if you have insomnia. It's about 17 pages long, linked to this. You can find this, by the way, by going to gradeculture.uoregon.edu. And just to distill down what we heard through all this feedback, through all this consultation that's been going on very intensively for the last 2 years, and with somewhat less intensity but ongoing effort for the last 5 or 6 years. Number one, people want us to respect academic freedom. And in that case, that means not interfering legislatively with the discretion of instructors to assign their own grades. And as you'll see, there's nothing in what we're proposing that would trammel on that freedom. 2, people wanted us to respect disciplinary differences, notwithstanding the fact that there are problematic differences among units across the university. There's a very powerful sense, both in the professional schools and in different units of CAS, that disciplines have very different and valid reasons for grading the way they do, and that no one standard, no one average, no one mean, no one distribution should be imposed upon the entire faculty. We heard with equal vociferousness, sorry, was that a question? Okay. That we should do nothing to harm students. There's always the danger that by taking unilateral action, we'll put our students at a disadvantage relative to students elsewhere. And while no policy can perfectly hold students harmless, because they're the ones, after all, who have to go out into the world with their grades, we've designed the policies that we're proposing to give information to students, to help them defend their own grades better as they take their transcripts out into the world, but not in through some mechanical or arbitrary way to knock their grades down. Why now? Why the urgency to this issue? Again, something that's been going on for some time, by some counts 20 years, other counts 40 years. As I said already, I think this is a moment in the history of higher education when people are asking us to substitute other means of assessment besides the historic ones we've always relied upon, grades. And I don't want to cast aspersions on those. I think many of those are really good ideas. But at the very least, we should be able to defend the practices that we've been relying on for so long and use them to articulate standards of quality, not because grades are the end-all, be-all, not because we want to set up an artificial competition for these things, but because, after all, the grades have been a part of higher education for quite some time, and they ought to be at least one of the means by which we communicate to our students how well or how poorly they're doing so they can do better, in fact, in the long run. That's it for my presentation. I don't yet see my colleagues besides Karen Sprague, who's professor of biology and the vice provost for undergraduate studies. So maybe before I go on and actually present the motions, I'll stop and ask if there are any questions about my preamble. Yes.
This running around, but this is actually our formal record for this meeting, and it's good to have it on the record. So tell us who you are.
Thank you. Marilyn Nippold, CDS Program, College of Education. I'm just interested in learning what you found out about possible reasons for the change. The comments that you've made about the factors, academic freedom, that's been around forever. And, of course, students always want good grades, but you're citing a period of time when grade inflation has increased, grades gone up. And I think it would be useful to take a look at some of the other factors that have changed at the university. For example, state support has gone down, so you might see a negative correlation there between the two there. Tuition has gone up, so you might see a positive correlation there. It would be, I think, useful to find out some of the factors that are supporting this. What are the changes? Because if we don't really have a handle on what's underlying all this, then any kind of solution may not work, may not be very effective.
Yeah, I wish I could give you an answer to that. And there are social scientists who have literally spent their careers trying to give an answer to that question. If you look back to the 60s, one of the explanations often given is the need to give certain students Vietnam-era draft deferrals, bumping up their grades so they don't get kicked into the military. Another explanation I've seen for the more recent bump up in the 1990s is the widespread move to student evaluations of teacher performance, which give an incentive to teachers to grade more easily, to cultivate better recommendations, to get better chances at promotion and tenure. I don't think that there is a neat set of causal explanations, much less a single causal explanation that we can point to. I can go on and give you more examples. The one that makes the most sense to me and that I think guides the design of these proposals is that in an informational vacuum, in a situation in which there are no generally articulated standards for what a grade should mean, in a situation in which students understandably have every incentive to lobby for higher grades, to want higher grades, in a situation where faculty don't have other resources to fall back on and may be tempted in that informational vacuum to raise those grades. Peter Gilkey, a professor of mathematics, put it to me this way, that in any situation that's characterized by an overall equilibrium, if there's a consistent incentive pushing it in one direction, it will gradually float in that direction. And I think that is the problem that we face. I don't know whether the specific solutions we've designed will actually counter the problem. We're going to go back and study that in a few years. But I want to emphasize that they're designed to enhance the meaning of grades first and foremost, and not necessarily, and perhaps not at all, to actually lower the grades that we've already got.
Could I just quickly? I'm sorry. I just wanted to follow that up. I know that people have put a lot of time and effort into trying to come up with a solution, but I'm kind of thinking that I think faculty themselves need some support here in terms of telling students what grades mean, and I'm not in favor of grade inflation, but I don't want to be the only one that's the bad guy. So I've kind of adopted a new procedure of trying to make a simple solution, and that is a statement in my syllabus to the effect that the University of Oregon discourages grade inflation for the reasons that you just stated earlier, and then to actually state what each grade means. A means excellent, and so on, the traditional meanings. It's similar to the kind of information that we're all asked to put into our syllabi every year about things like you're not supposed to give tests early and diversity and all these different issues. And so why not try a simple solution that would make it clear to all parties what grades mean and that the university discourages grade inflation?
I actually think that's what these proposals are doing. And so maybe, I don't know, Nathan, would you like to keep with questions? Or we have our co-presenters here right now. If we could go to that, then perhaps we can answer this question more precisely. Okay. So welcome, guys. We have Matt Villeneuve, who's a student representative on the council, history major, Karen McLaughlin, fellow faculty member from the College of Education. And Matt's got to get to class at 4, so I want to turn it over to him. He's going to present motion 11A, and then Karen, are you going to do 11B and C? Okay, great. So let's do that and then continue the discussion afterwards. Do you want the text of the?
I actually have it.
We'll put it up.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Do I need a do I need a microphone? Yes, does that panel hear me? I hate mics. You have to. I can use it. Awesome. All right. Well, I can participate with that. I have it right here. Thank you, though. Well, my name is Matt Villeneuve. I'm a university junior. I'm a history and philosophy major, and I'm actually on the Undergraduate Council as well. So I thought I'd share a couple of the things and introduce our first motion and explain some of the background. I wish I was here earlier to hear what the comments were, so I'll address what I can. Essentially, as a student, and we have some students here I know as well, so you guys can speak to this too, I'm sometimes at a loss for what grades mean. Sometimes, do my grades simply reflect the measure of how well I'm able to memorize rote information and then recite it on a test? Do my marks take into account any effort or strength of schedule? Or are my grades actually awarded based on a percentage along a bell curve that are awarded to me and my peers in a certain class? All of the above, none of the above. So sometimes there's a lack of understanding concerning that issue. And of course, even if we could reach an understanding of that issue, I would still be in the dark as a student as to which professor subscribed to which notion. And I wouldn't necessarily know in any way whether that would transcend different departments or different classes. And so I really wouldn't have much of an understanding beyond what I think the student manual says is like A is excellent and C is average. That's basically the understanding that we have now to that level of detail, which is not very much. And of course, we could talk about that all day, and that's very much what the Undergrad Council's been doing, and that I've participated in for the last 2 years. But also, there's another aspect. I work as a freshman interest group teaching assistant in first-year programs, so I live and work in the dorms. And I can tell you that there are some strange notions about what grades mean that have filled kind of this vacuum that has been created by this lack of understanding. Some of my favorites, of course, I'd be preaching to the choir if I told you that many students think that office hours are there for the sole purpose of negotiating grades, but there it is. Also, a lot of students also regard us getting a C as a death sentence. And my favorite, I think, is the gentleman's B, which is the notion that if you go to class 100% of the time, you should at least, merit a B. So I'm not sure how accurate any of those are. So even if we could, even if we could come to a joint understanding, half the issue is translating that and communicating that to students. So the Undergrad Council started with this sentiment, and then we shaped it kind of into 3 motions, of which I would share the first, and the text is right there. So motion 11A, or the first one, basically would like to establish discipline-specific rationales for grading standards. Ideally, each department and undergraduate program would then have a formulated rationale for its grading practices, posted then on a website or made available by the Undergraduate Council. And as a student, these rationales would be really helpful in understanding the context of not only my performance in mastering the knowledge in a certain class, but what it means in the larger context of education here at the U of O. Most importantly, I kind of want to, this is my cheat sheet, I want to reiterate a line that I have highlighted, bolded, italicized, and underlined in my notes, which is that an important facet is that such rationales should articulate the general standards of academic achievement in a given discipline and should not be formulated in a way that binds individual instructors. And as somebody who thinks they might want to get their PhD someday, I understand the importance of that as well, hence the highlight. Additionally, it would be great, I think, if departments could also devote specific attention to the A+, so students in the department or in the major would know where their department stands on that issue. And I think finally, I think it's important to reiterate, at least as far as I'm concerned, there's not so much a crisis in the way that we issue grades, but more an issue of proactive reform, I would say. And I think these steps would go a long way in ultimately addressing and proactively shaping the grade culture here at the U of O, and aid me and my peers in understanding a little bit more about what grades mean. So I would love to, of course, stick around for questions and reiterate more, but I actually have to go to biology class, so I will leave the discussion to those far above my pay grade.
Thanks. Thanks for coming. So now I'll turn it over to Karen McLaughlin.
So I will be discussing the other 2 motions, and I will be using my crib sheet to make sure I get all of this right. So the second motion concerns making available to all instructors the mean grades and grade distributions for their courses. So beginning in fall of 2011, instructors would be able to see this information in DuckWeb prior to the time that they actually hit the submit button for their grades. This information then would remain in each CRN's course record, which as faculty we're going to see as our previous course lists in DuckWeb. In addition, following the submission of those grades, faculty then would be given access to a standard set of statistics, which will allow them not only to see their own statistics, but to compare them to distributions from relevant courses. Now, relevant courses could be courses which are the same name and number, courses in the same discipline or the same college, and work needs to be done to determine which statistics would be the most valuable to faculty. In addition, the Undergraduate Council would need to work with the registrar to determine how exactly that sort of information could be pulled together and then distributed to faculty. So by way of explanation, the purpose of this motion is to provide instructors additional relevant information to self-assess their grading practices. The data should allow faculty to be able to compare their own grading practices across time as well as to relevant colleagues. It's intended to provide instructors a tool to evaluate their grading and to help them make decisions about changing or retaining their individual grading practices. And in addition, I think this information could start the conversations that we've suggested through Motion 1 by giving faculty a broader perspective on what grades look like across colleagues as opposed to their own individual grade distributions. All right. So the third motion, Motion 11C, has to do with contextual information on transcripts. So this proposes that specifically transcripts would show the percentage of A grades that are given in a particular course. And this percentage of A grades would be reported alongside the grade that the student received in the class. So this information, with some caveats, this information would not be available for courses with enrollments of 20 or fewer. These courses may have a justifiably skewed distribution. So, for example, a very specialized upper division seminar we would expect that we would have a higher percentage of A's. Also, this information can't be available for any course wherein the release of that information would violate FERPA provisions. So, again, using the example of a small course, the registrars indicated that publishing the percentage of A's has the potential to allow some students to determine other students' grades based on percentages. So that would be a FERPA violation, and we'd have to determine the exact number so that we wouldn't be concerned about students being able to figure out other students' grades. So an important aspect of this policy is that its implementation is deferred until fall of 2013, so 2 years after the previous one. That then gives instructors sufficient time to be able to change their grading practices if they think that's necessary, and then to articulate that to their students. And it also allows the registrar sufficient time to change the format of the transcript, which apparently is no small feat to do that. So this policy is really aimed at the issue of grade compression. So that large number of grades in the upper range that's demonstrated by that increasing number of A's awarded at the U of O. By providing that information, outside evaluators, in particular employers and graduate school admissions committees, would have context to understand an applicant's academic performance. First and foremost, I think what's come up about this is that such information would highlight students who perform well in academically rigorous courses, and that would put them in a favorable light to these external evaluators. So, for example, a very sound B in a rigorous course that had a low percentage of A's would be viewed as a very positive grade. And then an A in that course would really point out an exceptional student. And I think this is really the issue of grade compression that is most important, is it makes it more difficult for us to pull out who are those strong students, who are those exceptional students, and in those types of evaluation situations, we really can't discriminate students. There can be a concern that students who receive A's in courses that have a high percentage of A's might be discounted, but we note that individual evaluators we've observed already apply their biases when they're evaluating transcripts. And this is particularly, we believe, in the area of graduate school applications. So they're really using their own internal metric to evaluate whether a course is easy or difficult, and they're making judgments in that light. And this information would, in fact, give them objective data to test their own perceptions regarding a course. Other institutions, interestingly, have implemented policies related to putting the percent of A's on a transcript. It's relatively unique, but Columbia, Indiana University at Bloomington, and Dartmouth College, as well as Canadian institutions McGill and the University of British Columbia, all put similar information on transcripts. And in fact, UNC Chapel Hill is currently working on a policy to do the same thing. Contacts with administrators at the universities who have a policy in place has revealed that campus response is generally favored in terms of this policy. Students report that it adds value to the transcripts and does increase the fairness of applying to graduate school. It does not necessarily, though, change grading policies. That makes sense. Faculty don't look at transcripts as they're giving grades to students. So the implementation of that policy is therefore purposefully delayed. It will allow instructors and departments to potentially counteract the issue of grade compression prior to this being initiated.
So you've now had a pretty complete explanation of the three motions. We have time, and I think we should use the time wisely because this is an important set of potential changes at this university and encompasses every college and school. So I think it's time to take questions, and we're going to go back there to take them. Okay.
Glenn Modell, Economics. This is actually something that came up in the earlier question that I think our presenters have now just missed, but I'm going to kind of refresh your memory if I can. The question was brought up about mechanisms and things like that, what's causing it. Larry Sengel and I have done a considerable amount of work on a variety of issues, one of which brought us really close to this issue of grade inflation, or the potential maybe issue of grade inflation, when we were looking at retention issues. So it was sort of a side project on the way to understanding retention. But we learned a few different things that are pertinent to the question and to the discussion. Grades differ in at least two ways, right? Cross-sectionally, across classes, across departments, etc., and across time. And I think when we use the language grade inflation, we're tending to think a lot more about across time, that grades are on the rise. It's certainly the case to us. It's a very difficult case to make that for a given class, grades are going up over time. In fact, it's a very weak case that one would be able to build statistically to demonstrate that for an Econ 201 class, the grades are any different now than they were 10 years ago. And that's pretty robust across disciplines. The thing that has changed, however, is that over time, students have been sort of chasing grades, if you will. So there's a large compositional change in the student contact with different grades, and that shows up in average grades changing quite considerably. There's also the advent of new programs and new classes and things like that, and every time we see such a thing, maybe it's not too surprising. You launch that class, you try and attract students, and one of the ways you can attract students is by coming out at a 4.0. So most new classes launch themselves at 4.0. So to the extent new classes arrive in the schedule and students, even if it's randomly, take those classes, grades should go up. It's a very difficult thing, I think, as you're suggesting, it's a difficult thing for us to change grading policies. If you do launch yourself at a 4.0, I think it's probably more difficult to come down from that than it would be for a class at a 3.0 to move up, right? So I think it's not early, well, we haven't seen it long enough to really comment on it, but you would expect that these new classes that have launched at 4.0 are going to stay at 4.0. At least that might be my prior. So a couple, sort of dimensions of what's behind it, but I think it actually pays for us to consider at least the sort of the cross section as something very different from the time series dimension of inflation.
Thank you. I promised a student down here about an hour ago that I would let him have the next question.
Thank you. Brian Powell, student representative of the ASUO Senate. And for context, I guess I'm a major in philosophy and political science. So the first question I have is, how do we compare to other colleges and universities across the nation with where our grade median lies?
Our average grade is a 3.10, and that's exactly the average in other public research level universities. It's lower than private universities, which have higher grades.
Okay. Well, if that's exactly the average, do we really want to try and push that down any? I mean, wouldn't that put us at sort of a comparative disadvantage then with our students going into graduate schools?
That's why we're taking a very gingerly approach, because we're not, I mean, from my perspective, if you get the same grades, the same 310, but you know better what you're supposed to be doing for that, and we can be clear as faculty members that you're actually working to that standard, grades can stay the same. And I think we've been very deliberate about not designing mechanisms that will force grades down. Some classes, yes, they may go down. Some classes, who knows, they may go up. And we're working, too, with other universities in our category, beginning to share information so that we're all at least trying to stay on the same page.
Okay. And then just real briefly to go over the motions, for the C, I'm not so sure how I feel about that yet, one way or the other. I think B is great. I think that's something that could be really helpful in sort of continuity of courses. But for A, I really do have a bit of a problem with it, and that may just be because I come from the social sciences where I'm graded on essays. And I feel like when you're graded on essays, even if you establish, say, well, like one of the professor I have in the philosophy department, Colin Copeman, he has a really good standard where he sets out boxes and things like that for what you should get for what grade, for different parts of your essay, et cetera. But all the graduate students actually grade the essays, read excellent as something different or good as something different, and those things is different. And especially when you apply it to essays and not just tests or math problems or things that are more straightforward, I think the real problem is how you define what the difference between an 88 paper is and a 92 paper is. Because on a transcript, that's a 3.3 to a 3.7, and that's a pretty big jump. And that's, I think, where a lot of people in my department have issues with grades.
Yeah, so I'm in the history department, and we rely on essays as well. And I think, one of the models we have is we were required to do these what are called assessment rubrics, where we're trying to describe in qualitative terms what is a good essay, what's an excellent essay, realizing there's going to be a lot of subjective variation in that, but that we can say, for instance, for us, citing evidence from the past is very important. For philosophy, logical rigor is important. These things are very basic, but you'd be surprised at how little they're actually made articulate across the university. And that's pretty much what we're asking for here. Yep.
You also brought up a really important issue around GTFs grading your work and the potential for a discrepancy between the instructor of record and the GTF. That was something that did come up in our discussion, and though it wasn't one of our primary motions, I'm really hoping that doesn't get lost. That it's very clear to us from all the investigations we've done that GTFs need more training so that they learn how to grade. And we realize that people grade as they were graded. If they're not specifically trained, then they don't know how to do it. So encouraging departments, when they welcome their GTFs onto campus, to talk about this very issue, and that potentially then having a standard for grading around a discipline will help them implement some training of GTFs to try to bring that back into alignment, because we recognize it's a problem.
Dean Walton, University of Oregon Libraries. Do we have a published histogram of the distribution of class sizes that we can look at? Because that would really affect, I think, motion B there, about how many classes fall under that less than 20 students, or how many are above that.
We may have some historical data available to us.
Sue Evelyn, University Registrar. We have lots of data. We don't publish the data based on number of courses, but we certainly have it and can get it. So I can't tell you right now how many courses what percentage of courses would fall under that line, but it's not hard to get. So it's something that we could work on at Undergraduate Council. I also sit on Undergraduate Council, so I could facilitate that.
Hi, Reza Rajay from Computer Science Department. I just have a couple of comments and a couple of quick questions. For motion 11C, you indicated you want to specify the percentile that covered for A. Why not do that for B and C? I mean, that would be that is essentially summarizing the distribution. And quite honestly, I think that would do most of what you want to do without stepping on anyone's toes. That, I think, addresses a lot of things you want to do right there.
I think we wanted to provide, first of all, you need to provide as little information as you can to make an effect, so that people who are skimming transcripts and just look at it quickly will be able to pull out something relevant. We decided on percent A because that's the problem that the original Mark Thoma report identified. That's where the bulge is occurring in the number of grades, and that's where you sort of assume people make assumptions about a history class, for example, having 50% A's. And so that piece of data, it's not perfect, it's not a full distribution, not a histogram, but it is a helpful piece of information for someone skimming a transcript.
But in my discipline, only 10% of people get A, and A plus B may barely make it to 50%. So that's why I think people who get B are still good students in class, and if you want to give them a way to sort of use the transcript to show what they've achieved, I think they deserve the same thing. So I'm saying, I just don't understand why you're just separating A group from the rest. That's one question.
Well, that will make your students look better, correct? If you give very few A's.
No, but I'm saying B students who are half the class along with A's are still important group, and performance-wise, they have done something that is worthy of sort of recognition. Why don't we say A is equal to 10 percentile and B is equal to 30 percentile or 50 percentile of the class, bottom of the bracket? I mean, what is wrong with that? Is it too much information to reveal?
Yes. I mean, there's not a lot of real estate on the transcript.
I was going to say that some of our discussion did center around what a transcript is. It is a report of the student's performance. The more data you put on there, you start to lose the student. You start getting lost in a bit of data, and you lose the student. Some would argue that a transcript should only be a record of grades and nothing else. So we did attempt to find, I like that idea of real estate, the smallest piece of real estate that would have meaning in context with the data that we had. So I think you could argue that always more data could give you better interpretive value. However, could we really put that on a transcript? Our discussions have centered around the fact that there are both logistical and sort of theoretical issues about that.
I mean, I don't want to get stuck on this point, but what I'm saying is you want to put the minimum amount of information that help maximum number of people, right? If you put it only for A, I understand for history this covers 50% of the class. For many disciplines, it doesn't. And I think I'm concerned about the other 40% who got B. And frankly, B students may need that separation more than A, because A students are often good. I mean, so that's one point I wanted to make. I think you just got my point. The other thing is that it seems to me that you want to push the distribution towards some notion of a standard or accepted or common. When you show me all those distribution by others, and whether being my own classes from the past or my colleagues, it's sort of, there is a good distribution that I have to be close to, and that's fine. But there are so many elements into this. I'm sure you know about classes that two colleagues offer in one department, and the level of difficulty and detail and even the philosophy of the exam is separate because of freedom of do it your way. And I think that's fine. So where does that come to this? I mean, because you show, the distribution may even look the same, but I can assure you that what they got out of the class is not the same.
Yeah, I think this just adds one piece of information that people don't have already, and they can do whatever they want with it. I mean, I looked at my own grades today. You can go online to myedu.com and find this information already from a commercially available website. And it was kind of revealing to me. I turned out to offer a higher number of B's than I found out. I mean, that informs my pedagogy. It's not going to necessarily change the way I grade tomorrow, but it's a very useful piece of information to know, both relative to my own classes and those of my colleagues.
Right.
Does that answer the question?
Right. I mean, you can talk about it across different colleagues. Even for myself, I mean, teaching across different terms, the same class, I don't think my teaching changes from year to year significantly, but the quality of the students we get might change, And it's good to look at that distribution for myself to just see whether I'm way off. But at the same time, I can think of reasons that it could be off 1 year from the other year for obvious reasons. But I think it's good to have. But I think having A and B percentile would definitely, at least for B as well, would help. Thank you.
Robert Keir, School of Music. And first I want to commend Ian and Undergraduate Council for what's been, I'm sure, really challenging. I mean, this is not an easy topic. Of course, it matters to literally everyone who's involved in education in any way on our campus. I have to say respectfully, though, I disagree on many, many points. And I just want to set them out there for some consideration. First, I'd like to thank, I think you said, I couldn't quite hear, Marianne, is that? Marilyn, I'm sorry, for her comments. I think the general spirit of what I'll say is echoing what she's saying. Let's find a simple solution rather than something that is so complex and filled with so many new layers of administration and changing transcripts and so forth and so on. And also, although it says here no financial impact, I don't believe it for a moment. There will be many work hours spent implementing it. And in addition, there will probably be more administrative jobs created, possibly. And there will be a great change in the way we look to other institutions as our transcripts change, and we don't have data to tell us what that will mean. We don't know that, since only a few institutions, by the report we were given, have done this. So we don't really have a control against which to measure what will happen when we change our transcripts. And it will take a lot of time and work, and I believe it all has a financial impact. So yes, a simple solution. Then I'd like to thank the student here. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I also couldn't hear. Brian, I thought your point was very well taken as well. You know, what do grades really mean? Maybe a simple solution could be what Marilyn was proposing. Can't we just simply define the grades and have a general understanding of what they mean, and let our faculty grade according to their own disciplines? After all, they know those best. Why do we need such an elaborate system? Also, I would like to say that there are some procedural issues comparing the motions to the actual charge of the Undergraduate Council. It doesn't quite line up. There are certain ways in which the Council would be claiming authority to do things which are not in the actual charge. I'd be glad to go over those at another time or discuss them now if people are interested. But I think it goes beyond, let's say, the charge of the Council. You don't really have the authority to implement, regulate, or enforce. And I don't know who does it.
It's a trade-off between hiring more administrators and then having faculty supervise it, which is the way it would be on the Council. But I understand that.
Okay, well, that's more financial impact, so forth and so on. I'm concerned. I'm very concerned about these motions.
Thank you. I'm going to roll down here. There's a couple of student questions and then another question in the same row. Students have had their hands up first. I think Zach is the first.
Zachary Stark McMillan, student senator, ASUO. I just wanted to respond to Robert really quick. I think that the first or 11A addresses that concern almost exactly, where it clearly defines, based on each academic department, each department defines what their grades mean, which is the simplest solution, as you said, and it does that. That's exactly what it does. Each department defines for them what their grades mean, and each instructor can put that on their syllabus and make sure that everyone knows that. And so I think that is the simplest solution, and I think that's what in many ways I think these are not heavy-handed things. They're just providing more information. C is the biggest change, and is also just more information. They're not. It doesn't seem like they're trying to enforce a lot of things or prevent professors from grading how they want. It seems to be a lot of just, here's more information, and instructors can do whatever they want with it. And so I think they're fairly reasonable changes to address this issue.
Hi, Ian Fielding, student senate as well. So thanks for your hard work on this. During the presentation, I was a little worried, though. It was stated that academically rigorous courses are determined by the percentage of A's. I don't know if that's always necessarily true. If you have a high-quality instructor, I think that can translate into more students doing well in the course. And I also think that if you have a strong number of students in that course compared to another class, it could lead to higher grades, because in any given class, you could have a anomaly where you just happen to have a lot of outstanding students. I also felt that Motion 11C was giving contextual information, but it was only true in the sense that it was giving automated information in comparison to other students, but didn't appropriately take into the context of the academic strength of the students in the course or the quality of the instructor. So I'm kind of seconding what Stark said. I agree with his reasons for Motion 11A, but I don't agree with Motion 11C. I fear this policy is going to push professors and instructors towards grading harder or easier to match a curve, which I don't like. And they'll be able to see that, from my understanding, via Duck Web or some other mechanized form. I think it's dangerous because I like professors and instructors grading based off their aggregate students' performance in the respective classes, not due to past or other concurrent courses. Let's see. And one thing I heard from another faculty member, I'm forgetting who it was, they were saying that higher number of B's may affect. Was that you? You were saying that someone had a high number of B's in their courses. What? Computer science, yeah. And that could possibly affect how you're grading, but I don't think that that should necessarily be the only element that goes into that. And you touched on that as well. There's many elements that affect the grade students are getting in your course, and I want all those variables to be considered. Furthermore, I would really like this to be presented again before the ASCO Senate. I don't think it's been presented this year, maybe in a year prior. So last year it was?
Yeah, it was last year.
Okay. So yeah, it'd be great if it happened this year. And so again, just to reiterate, 11A sounds great because it provides a more clear grading rubric that professors will have to post on their syllabuses and online. But I'm skeptical of the other measures.
Can I just respond briefly before there's too much of a backlog? I just want to say briefly that I don't think these are complex either in terms of their design or their administrative implementation. And it's very important for, especially the purposes of 11A, to realize this puts power in the hands of faculty, not administrators. The programming changes that, as I understand them, needed to implement B and C are relatively minimal. Sue Evelyn says if I can say it, they can program it, and that should be automated as a task. In response to this, I fully sympathize with these. I think they're designed to re-steer the ship very gradually so that the professors who are doing very well and as a result harvest lots of A's don't immediately get singled out as being outliers. They've got a couple years to adjust. Maybe they'll want to consider making their classes a little more challenging to spread out the grades a little bit, but that's entirely up to their discretion.
Okay, Anna Liskaya, English. A lot of different points have come up since I wanted to respond to Robert, and so I'm afraid that I will lose some of my response simply because time went by. But I do want to say that I think this is a very elegant thing for the university to do. I also think it is ethically sound because we are, in a sense, really lying to the public if we do not explain what an A is, and if we are handing many students A's and not differentiating. What is happening nationally is that, assessment is a business, and this is not going to cost the university or the taxpayers very much. But if we get an assessment business in the state that's going to be then coming in from the outside telling us what to do and so on, it's going to be a lot more heavy-handed. And since there's such a call for accountability, which I think is reasonable, one of the ways that we can respond to that is to define our terms and try to help not only the public but also obviously our students think about grading a little bit more rigorously. I think that it is absolutely reasonable and actually an imperative for faculty to be reflective about their grading. And the thing that I see happening with this mechanism is that it does not impose how many A's I can give, how many B's, what the perfect essay looks like, what the perfect lab report looks like. It doesn't do that. It really does allow for a faculty member to simply, and it's encouraging faculty and I think departments, to make clearer to students what standards are. But it isn't putting me in fetters at all. I'm much more concerned about outside forces way beyond academe who are interested in assessment and who, hold jobs and make tons of money with assessment. And I would much rather see us support each other in reflecting very thoughtfully about our grades. And so, I don't see anything that's problematic with A, B, or C. Ideally, yeah, I do agree. It would be great if outside employers, graduate schools might be able to see what, let's say, I give in a Chaucer class, how many A's, B's, and C's. But when you're talking about graduate school, that kind of information actually tends to wind up in letters of recommendation or in the forms that we fill out for graduate school. So I think that just having just the A, it makes it simple, and it encourages reflection, and it encourages greater honesty, and there's nothing more important for our own integrity for us to do right now.
We've run out of time. And I apologize, but we have other things on the agenda. This has been a very useful conversation for me to hear the different sides of this issue. It enlightens me very much, and I hope the rest of you. But we're not done with this issue. This is coming back for a vote at the next Senate meeting, and we will have this conversation again. And in the meantime, I would ask you all, because this affects everybody on this campus, to talk about it with your colleagues and to find out what everybody thinks. People need to know that this is on the Senate agenda, and they need to voice their opinion and come to the meeting if they have a strong opinion one way or the other. I want to thank the Undergraduate Council very much for their hard work over many years to bring this kind of thoughtful proposal to the floor of the Senate, and we will have them back again next time. Thank you both.
UGC proposals, one word, at uoregon.edu. It's a dedicated UGC, Undergraduate Council, and that's forwarded to my personal email. Yeah, just one UGC PROPOSALS at uoregon. The blog is open not for comments, but to review prior comments.
Thank you both. All right. By the way, this is what the Senate's all about, to discuss some very important issues, and I thought the conversation today was very thoughtful. So we've gotten through new business, we've gotten through the open discussion, and now we come to the reports. This is a last-minute item, and I'm very glad we're able to fit it in. It's a report on the Oregon Model for Sustainable Development. It's a very interesting and thoughtful proposal by the Campus Planning Committee, and I'd like to ask Christine Thompson, who's in the Campus Planning Committee Planning Office. I didn't realize they changed the name to Real Estate Office. Oh, and we have our university architect coming down, too. There is a PowerPoint presentation, which should be right. We're having 3 people? Whoa. Whoa. One can talk, one can use the computer, and the other one can look happy. So why don't you all introduce yourselves and tell us how you're going to break this up. Okay, come on.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. My name's Chris Ramey. I'm the university's architect and the Associate Vice President for Campus Planning and Real Estate. I'm joined today by Christine Thompson, who's a planning associate in my office, and Steve Mattel, who's the director of the Sustainability Office on campus. We're here to talk about the Oregon Sustainable Development Plan, the Oregon Model for Sustainable Development. We're at a mid-course of looking at this proposal. So we're eager to hear your feedback, your comments, and any suggestions about who else should be consulted as we move forward with this idea. We have about 15 minutes of presentation split up among the three of us, exactly 15. And then hopefully that leaves 15 minutes for you all to ask questions and discuss with us. I'll be giving a little bit of the background. Steve will be talking about the details of the model, and Christine will be telling us how it's all going to be afforded. 10 years ago, the university adopted a campus sustainable development plan, which was, run through the campus planning committee at the time. At the time, it won a national award. It was one of the first sustainable development plans for a university campus, and it was widely copied across the country. Since that time, we've been busy here on the campus. Many of you work with faculty members who do a lot of research in sustainable development, sustainable design, and in particular, those from AAA in architecture, such as Charlie Brown, John Reynolds, Ehab El-Zavadi, and Alison Kwok. Also, during that 10 years, we've built over 1 million square feet of buildings on campus. So we have this great combination of a lot of good research that's been on campus and a lot of good hands-on experience with how to build buildings. In that 1 million square feet of buildings, several have achieved the LEED standard. LEED is a leader in energy efficient design. That's an award given by the Green Building Council of the United States. The arena, for example, will get the gold standard. The Alumni Center is working towards platinum, and the new science project, the Lewis Integrative Science Building, is also working towards platinum in that system. Last year, with Steve's leadership, the university adopted a climate action plan, and some of you may have participated in the development of that as well. And then finally, in his investiture about a year ago, Richard Lariviere talked about continuing this great leadership in sustainable development and really challenged us to go to the next level in that area. We have developed for ourselves a rather audacious goal. We plan to become the industry standard for sustainable development on university campuses. We want to be the campus that everyone else imitates. We want to be the gold standard. We want to be the one where everyone comes and says, we want to do what the University of Oregon is doing. And we think we can do that. We've given ourselves a year to do that, so by June we hope to be back to the president with a proposal. That would be June of this year. So we're already about 10 months or so into that year, maybe 8 months. We began with a roundtable, and the roundtable included practicing professionals both from locally here from Eugene and from Portland, obviously our faculty in the area, students and our staff, and we began asking them the question, what is the next step in sustainable development? What are the questions we should be asking ourselves, and how can we get there? And the advice we got from them was to really leverage our ability as a campus to stop going building by building and instead look at what we can achieve, thinking of the campus as an ecological district. Their advice to us was quite simple. Concentrate on energy, water, and people. And in fact, one of the members of the roundtable said, well, it's even simpler than that. It's really energy, energy, energy. If you do just that, you'll have more effect on the environment than anything else. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve, and Steve's going to walk us through the details.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll take a few minutes to give you a conceptual overview, kind of a sort of left brain view of things, and Christine will do the other side of the brain. I can never remember if it's left or right, which suggests something, I guess, about me. Okay, so by way of introduction, let me say how I got into this. 3 or 4 years ago, my wife and I were having our second kid and decided we needed to do an addition to our house. It was, at the time, it was 1,200 square feet. We decided to do an 800 square foot addition. And being the sustainability director at the University of Oregon, there was some cognitive dissonance with that, and I felt some guilt, so I decided, well, we need to have some sustainability goals associated with our own development here. And so we said no additional energy consumption in our new house. Okay, so what we'll create this 800 square feet, but we'll do all this retrofits in the existing part of the house such that the new house, the combined square footage, doesn't have any additional energy use, and the metric will be the EWEB bill that we got. And so it's 3 years later, and actually we do use less energy now than we did before, just with a variety of retrofits, window upgrades and switching out the appliances and hyper insulation, all that kind of stuff. So So that was an example we did at the residential scale. About a year ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Chris and Christine and some people in this room and some other folks as part of a design charrette for the Allen Hall addition, and it's doing an addition roughly the same proportions as what happened on my house, and so we in part because of that experience, we decided to give the design team a similar goal. Can you build that addition such that it does not require any more energy than the Allen Hall did previously? They're a year into their design. They haven't started breaking ground yet, but it looks like, with a few caveats, that they will achieve that goal. So now we have an example at the residential scale. We have an example at the commercial scale. And where we're going next is to see if we can roll that up at the campus level. So let me just walk you through the components of it. Okay, so this is a map of our campus. The buildings are in red. It's just the contiguous campus here in Eugene. There's some additional square footage, of course, in other parts of the state, but there's about 6 million square feet total represented here, and we think over the next 10 years that we might build a million to 1.5 million additional square feet. So we're talking about a large addition, and we built that much in the last 10 years, about 1 million square feet. So we're basing this on our recent past experience, and the proposal for the campus is no additional energy consumption 10 years from now from what we have basically today. Okay, and so the question is, how do we achieve that? So the first piece of it is that, well, like I said, we establish a ceiling on campus building energy consumption. Okay, and next thing is that represents a building. We require that all new construction meet the LEED Gold standard. Right now we don't meet that standard. We're not required to meet that standard. Some of our buildings do, some don't. So all buildings have to meet that LEED Gold standard, and then they have to provide some money to campus facilities who will look at the campus as a whole and invest that money in energy retrofits wherever they might make the most sense, such that the energy retrofits, maybe it's a window replacement in this building and some ceiling insulation or whatever it is in the other building, such that the combined energy savings, equal the energy consumption expected for that new building, no net increase. Okay, so if we can convince the folks responsible for that project to trade up from the LEED Gold standard to what we're calling the Advanced Energy Efficiency Threshold. That's an internally designed set of criteria, and we'll get into the details of that later. Then some of the money for the retrofits elsewhere on campus come from a central fund from Johnson Hall, right? So that's the incentive to those folks. You build at this standard that we're asking you to build a hyper-efficient building, and you don't have to pay for all of the retrofits elsewhere on campus. Okay, so that's roughly speaking the energy piece. Let's just talk briefly about the results, and then I'll move on to energy, to water and people. So what happens over time is every time you get a new building on campus, it pays its lifetime energy costs up front. I'm not even using this thing.
You have to.
Oh, you have?
It's recorded.
Oh, I'm such a loudmouth. So it pays its lifetime energy costs up front, right? And it's a rising tide that we're creating because every time one of these buildings goes in, it triggers a bunch of retrofits in our 20th century building stock, bringing them up to 21st century energy efficiency standards. And then again, so you see what happens over time. We get these 21st century world-class standard buildings, and the 20th century stock comes up to par. So that's what it starts to look like over time. These dots and locations, by the way, of these buildings are totally arbitrary. They don't represent anything real. Okay, so enough said about the energy. Let me move on to water briefly. So right now the city of Eugene has some very strict stormwater treatment requirements that are placed on us and anybody else in Eugene. It applies only to new construction. All existing construction is grandfathered in. So that gives us an opportunity to do better than code for no additional cost. And so what we're proposing is that the money that would be required to treat for stormwater on a new property, some of that money be shifted to existing impervious services like parking lots or streets or whatever it is on campus, such so that at the end of the day, the same amount of water, the same amount of acreage is treated on campus, but the water being returned to the Willamette River up at the top of the river is cleaner at no additional cost. So that's the water component. And then finally, the people part. We're going to have this, if we follow through with this, we would have a far more dynamic campus in terms of its sustainability features than we currently have, and we want to make sure that we take advantage of the recruiting opportunities that are associated with that, both for faculty and students and staff as well. And so that we allow people to get more involved with their buildings and find ways to further save energy as a result of their interactions with them. So we want to put in place the signage, the educational features, as well as the data archiving materials so that students, particularly from architecture, faculty from architecture who want to study the impacts these buildings are having over time and possibly replicate them elsewhere in the world, will have that data set to work with. So that's the energy, the water, and the people part. And I'm going to pass it to Christine to talk about the money.
So how are we on time? 5 minutes. Okay. So this is the fun part. These are all great ideas, at least we think they are, but there is a cost factor. And so the question is, how much added cost would this represent for these new projects that would be moving forward? So the gray box represents a typical project cost for a new construction or a major renovation project. And we looked back 10 years at our prior projects to see what if we had implemented this on those projects. And the added total cost to do what we're thinking of is 0.5 to 6% additional cost for these building projects. And it's broken out in the categories that Steve was describing: the LEED certification, the training portion, the meeting the advanced energy threshold, and then at the top, the compensation to cover your new energy use by energy efficiency measures elsewhere. If you were to extrapolate this across a 10-year time frame, which is what we're looking at, a 10-year implementation period, as Steve said, we're anticipating about 1.5 million new square feet, which is about a $700 million investment. The total cost, and this would be kind of a maximum number, and again, we're looking at this as a sense of scale. I don't have exact figures. The total cost to implement this idea would be a maximum of $18 million over the next 10 years. So you can see $18 million versus $700 million investment. To look at this a little bit more discretely and maybe concretely is to take some examples of projects that have been either recently constructed or under construction. So the Loke Labs is on the far left. The project cost for that project was $15 million. Had we implemented this, we're guessing it would have added about 5.4% to that project cost. And here is the breakout, which I'm not going to go into detail, but it shows that that 5.4% is represented by a series of those costs. The thing I will note is at the very top of that breakout is a dark green box. That represents the portion that would come from central funds. So what we're talking about is an advanced energy efficiency threshold, which we're right now researching. What is that advanced threshold? What I've done here in our first assessment is to say, what if we were 60% better than the average building? What if we used 60% less energy than the average building? So that's pretty good, and it still represents a relatively small cost up front. And if you do so, you will get some funds allocated from central dollars to pay for those energy efficiency measures elsewhere. And then as you work across, you can see that the lab buildings, the residence halls, are higher cost because they're larger energy use. That's why there's such a range of what the added cost would be. When you move over to education, which would be the Headco Uni High renovation and upcoming Allen Hall, we anticipate a very low added cost because basically the renovations inherent in those projects have already compensated for the additional energy use required for the new construction.
So with that, thank you very much for your attention. I forgot to say how excited we were to be here. I hope there was some excitement that came through in our presentation, but it's really not very often that we get to speak to the Faculty Senate and get to do it in this setting where we think we're bringing something that's pretty exciting to the university. So with that, questions?
Let me do this. You hold on.
Yep.
Thank you, Frank Stahl. Excuse me, biology. That was very interesting, and I'm glad to see that you're looking at construction as a way to save on energy. To what extent will your committee look at faculty behavior as a way of saving energy, or student behavior? For instance, the possibility of inter-campus communications seminars being done electronically instead of by air travel, or athletic teams scheduling close to home and or taking fewer people along on their trips.
So I don't need to repeat the question, do I? Since everybody could hear it. So we are, as you noted, we are limited to new construction. So this really does talk about new constructions and buildings and the way the buildings operate. So the people component to our work is really all about how the building operates, to be sure that the user, and I think all of you are in buildings and use buildings, understand the difference when you come in the building, when you turn on the light switch, how much energy that takes, well, the options you may have in operating that building. So it's like an owner's manual for the building. We don't just want to do it once. We want to come back every few months and be sure it's all refreshed, because what we're finding is we're building these wonderful systems, but then in a couple of months or generation turnover of people, nobody remembers how they work. So the potential energy savings aren't being realized. I think that it's a logical extension of that exercise that people will also become aware of how else they use energy, and they will get to the issues that you're talking about. We're also working on parallel initiatives that have more to do with greening the campus and working on the culture of the campus so that all the things you talk about really come into play to everything we do.
Thank you. I'm Stephanie Midgiff with the library system. And I was wondering, and maybe this isn't really part of what you all are supposed to do here, but it sounds like this is kind of an aspirational sort of thing too. But I wonder, okay, but I'm wondering at what point we get down to more nitty-gritty things like, and I don't think we have this on campus, but I personally would like to see some sort of thermostat standard for consistency on campus, so that all the buildings, and I realize you can't, that would be difficult to do because of the age of some of the buildings, but I know we had a thermostat war in the law school where I work at one point a year or so ago, and it almost came to blows. And then I understand that there's encouragement now to not turn your thermostats up too high, but then they're issuing these approved personal heaters for people to have. So I don't know. I assume that they're probably pretty efficient. The other thing is dual flush toilets. They've been around for quite a while, and I was disappointed, and maybe we did go with the low flow, but I don't believe in this building that they put in the dual flush toilets. And I don't know about the new arena, but it just seems like that's a lost opportunity if we don't do the dual flush toilets. And finally, let's see. Oh, I work in the law school. I see lights left on all the time. I thought that we were supposed to be on some sort of system where I wish people would turn them off themselves. But if they're not going to, it seems like after 5 minutes they should go off, and that's not happening. And I think building facilities is working on that, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So I wonder if this is going to be incorporated.
Those are all excellent comments in the spirit of not actually debating it, because I think I have answers for a lot of those. But we really are here to hear all the comments, and I think that we have answers probably. And actually, set points for thermostats has come up in our exercise, and so that would be, as each building's designed, you would figure out what your set point was going to be, and then as we went back and did our commissioning, as we talked to the users of the building about how to use the building, that issue would come up, as well as many of the other things you're mentioning. So I think those are all good comments, and we're going to consider them as we go forward.
Just one thing to add, since you mentioned the law school, I'll let you know that one thing we're doing to determine more carefully what the implications are, what the opportunities are, we're going to look at some energy efficiency measures and do an assessment of a variety of building types on campus, and the Law Center is one of them.
Yeah, Deborah Healy, Linguistics. I'm really happy to see this happening. I know 15 or so years ago, the University of Oregon was notorious in state energy planning for ignoring meeting required energy standards. So this is very good to see, Oregon becoming a leader, as it should be, in this. I just had one question. What about the donated buildings where they're built by somebody else and donated to the U of O? How do you control those?
That question never comes up.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
So, as a matter of fact, that comes up in every single. We've probably done this presentation maybe 8 or 10 times now, including in front of the president and the executive leadership team and the vice presidents, et cetera. That question always comes up. As everybody knows, this is a donated building, and it's built outside of our control. So, basically, if this were adopted, the idea is it would be adopted for all buildings. The question is who pays for the costs needed to meet our higher standard. What we have heard so far from the president is that, of course, that we put the full price tag out there to our donors. This is what it costs to build according to our standards. If for whatever reason, people balk at that full cost, then it would be up to the university to make up the difference in order that we maintain our standards going forward. And of course, so I think that's the best answer we have at this time.
So I have a question. That is, this is the first time I've heard of it. I sort of took a little glance before I came today. This is very exciting. And I think, somebody mentioned about it being aspirational. I think it's more than just aspirational. I think this is a real firm goal you're trying to achieve. My question to you is, do you think that this proposal should come here for a vote? I think an endorsement by the Senate would go a long way towards supporting your proposal. So I would, if you think this is a good idea, and I'm not encouraging you to do one thing or another, but if you think it is a good idea, I would recommend that you come back with a motion that we can vote on, because this is exciting and it's campus-wide, and this kind of thing is what the Senate should be involved with and needs to be involved with. And so I strongly encourage you to consider that approach.
Well, only if you're going to support it, I guess.
Yeah, well, can we vote now? So the policy is as it should be promulgated up through the planning committee. So the planning committee will be making a recommendation to the president about, what the policy should be, because it will become an amendment to the campus plan. Having other bodies support that, I think, is all to the good, and we can work with you on the timing of when we think that's all going to happen. But I leave it to you to sort out, be sure we're, got everything all in the right order and doing everything right. But our imagination is, because it's an amendment to the plan, and that's what the campus planning committee does, that it's coming up through them to the president.
And I agree, but the campus planning committee also reports to the Senate. Yeah. And so, and I'm not trying to make a tug of war here between administrative prerogative and the university Senate, but all policies that affect the campus go through this body. And therefore, it needs to be adopted and supported by this body. That doesn't mean that this body is going to necessarily promulgate it or that we're the final authority, but it needs to come through here at some point in time. So, and since it's such an exciting proposal, I think it would behoove you to bring it here. Are there any other questions? If not, let me thank Chris and Steve and Christine for a really excellent presentation. We now come to the most exciting part of the Senate meeting, which means that we're very close to the end. And we have announcements and communications from the floor, and I believe that the esteemed Senate Vice President Robert Keir has a few announcements to make, and I will bring this to him.
I'll come up there and face everybody, since this is about shared governance and participation. And next year we will be voting on some of the very most important issues that have ever faced our university since its founding. And I'm hoping that all of us can reach out to our colleagues around the campus to really invite an increased measure of participation. So I'd like to appeal to you to please sign up for university committee service. We have appointed and elected committees. And also, could you please encourage all of your colleagues, and especially your closest colleagues, those you regard as your closest colleagues, to do that. It's so important. We're going to be sending an electronic form by email, and we've tried to make it as easy as we possibly could for you to do that and for your colleagues to do that. Then also, we'd like to enlist everyone in the Senate at present. Some of you will be, of course, finishing your term, and some of you will be continuing. But wherever you are in that cycle, if you could please encourage people to run this time. We'd like to have the largest slate that we've ever had, because we really need increased participation and enthusiasm in this body. And we can't do that simply by sending out emails, but we really need you to help in that pursuit. And again, your closest colleagues, anybody that you would really like to see serve along with you if you're continuing, or if you've been in and you're rotating off, somebody that you've always thought in your department could really contribute something. We need them, and we need you. And then finally, for the Committee on Committees, I'm the chair this year, and we're doing our 10th year review of the university standing committees. We're sending around an electronic template for those of you who are a chair of a standing committee. We've made this incredibly easy. We've made everything so simple to fill out, and if it doesn't apply to you, you can put NA, and that's your response. But instead of asking you to do a written report, just fill out that electronic template. It won't take long at all, and I really hope that it will make life easier for you. I know you don't want to write another report, especially at this time of year. So I look forward to your response to that, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Robert. Are there any other announcements from the floor? With that, it is my joyous duty to call this meeting into adjournment. Thank you for being here, and see you next time.